Evidence before the Royal Commission on Indian Currency and Finance. Part 10. Yes, but if previous to that, with a brief interval of some years, it has ranged equally for 20 years at 1 shilling 4 dime, you would brush aside all those considerations? Yes, because there are no contracts now existing that were made 20 years ago, and therefore we need not be concerned about it. This is your argument, and you would also brush aside its economic effect both on agriculture and on the industries of the country? I say they will be very good. By bringing the ratio to 1 shilling 6 times, I say that there might be some depression of profits, but there won't be a depression of industry. Yes, so you don't attach great value to those factors. You think on the whole it would be good for the country? Yes. I will put you another question, a little bit imaginary. We will take 6 months to write out our report. Within the next 6 months, if the ratio becomes 1 shilling 8 times, I suppose you would be justifying in taking that according to you as the basis of your calculation? Then I would again say you should strike an average between 1 shilling 8 dime and 1 shilling 6 dime, or 1 shilling 4 dime, between 1 shilling 8 dime and 1 shilling 6 dime. And you think that that would be a sound financial polity? Well, I don't know. You have to strike some sort of average. You can't do justice to each individual contract. For instance, if you take the example of the American War of Independence and the monetary fluctuations that took place then, all that the Americans could do was, of course, do this kind of thing, to strike an average and to dissolve all contracts on that basis. They could not do justice to every individual contract. It is impossible. Sir Henry Strakosch. Dr. Ambedkar, I want to refer back to some statements which you made in regard to the undesirability of introducing a gold exchange standard. At one period of your evidence, you stated that the convertibility into exchange would not limit the issue of the currency and would therefore not produce stability of internal prices. That was one of the objections you raised, and then at another point, you said that the gold exchange standard is not a desirable standard because prices would be less stable under it than under a full fledged gold standard. Yes, now you are a student of economic affairs and you have no doubt followed the proceedings of the Genoa conference. Well, I did when I was in London. Recently, of course, I have not. But I know that the gold exchange standard was proposed. Well, you will remember that the Genoa Conference, an international conference, adopted unanimously a proposal enjoining the countries to adopt a gold exchange standard with a view of stabilizing the purchasing power of gold, and that they recommended for that purpose the cooperation of certain central banks. I don't suppose they did it with a view to stabilizing the purchasing power of gold. They did it to stabilize their own currency. They stated definitely it was to stabilize the purchasing power of gold. Anyway, you can take it from me that is so. Now, that is an international body, and they have come to that conclusion, and they apparently do not share your view that the gold exchange standard does not produce as great a measure of stability internally as the gold standard. Oh no, my submission is that we are comparing the gold exchange standard to a purely inconvertible standard. The belligerent countries had during the war an absolutely inconvertible currency, and certainly an inconvertible currency is much worse than an exchange standard because it has some convertibility. As I have stated myself in subparagraph 2 to paragraph 2, they were not comparing the gold standard to the gold exchange standard, they were comparing the gold exchange standard with the paper currency they had. But I submit they did not compare at all. They made a recommendation, but in reference to the circumstances that existed then, I should limit it that way. Well, anyway, that is a fact. Not quite. No, quite apart from that, I am not quite sure what makes you think, apart from a change in the purchasing power of gold itself, why the gold exchange standard should not be as stable as the gold standard. I don't quite follow that, and before you answer, I should like to just just to define what I understand by gold exchange standard. A gold exchange standard is a standard where there is circulating within the country a currency which is not convertible internally but is freely convertible externally, and you could make that currency convertible into gold for export purchases. Now, taking that standard, I should be very glad if you would tell us why such a standard is less able to maintain stability than a gold standard. I follow your question, sir, and my reply is this. Convertibility is a means of limiting the volume of currency to the needs of a country, a sufficient efficacy to limit the volume of that currency. Consequently, you cannot have stable internal prices to such a currency. Why do you say that it is less efficacious than convertibility for internal purposes? Because convertibility to be effective must be absolute. But it is absolute? It is not. But obviously it is. It is absolute. The difference is only that in the one case you convert into international money for international purposes, and in the other case you convert for either international money which is used internationally or international money which circulates within the country. No, no. The point is this. When your obligations to convertibility are imperfect, as in the case of the exchange standard, you are likely to issue more currency without fear. But you just said that the obligation to convert limits the issue in both cases? Yes, but converting depends upon the efficacy of the means of convertibility. If your convertibility is absolute, that is to say, if an issuer is bound to convert whenever he is presented with his currency, then that convertibility is absolute. But my proposition was that the gold exchange standard binds the issuing authority to convert the internal token currency into gold for external purposes and not for all purposes. Now I want to know why the obligation to convert the token currency for internal purposes should increase the stability of the purchasing power of that money. Because the principle is that any commodity and currency included maintains itself by the fact that it is limited in volume and in supply. That is the first elementary proposition of political economy, that any commodity maintains itself by reason of the fact that the supply is limited. If the commodity supplied is not limited, it is bound to depreciate. Do you then contemplate that in your gold standard with gold currency, there should be nothing but gold coins circulating? No, I say that the rupee shall circulate. And no banknotes? Yes, there will be banknotes, why not? Then I don't see how you are limiting more effectively the internal issue in the one case than in the other, because I am saying that the mint shall be closed. What about the issue of banknotes? They are covered. A covered note issued is not in addition to currency. Supposing you deposit a certain amount of gold in the bank and you issue so much currency to cover it, that currency is not in addition to the currency. Oh, you want to have notes covered by 100% gold? Well, I don't say 100% gold. Then how will you limit it? I mean, convertibility is a method of limitation. I will have paper currency which is fully, absolutely convertible and not merely for the purposes of external trade. And I will have the rupee absolutely fixed in limit, so that it will maintain its value by reason of the fact that it is limited. The paper currency will maintain its value by reason of the fact that it is convertible. And how will you manage the seasonal requirements of currency? Well, I say you can expand the fiduciary portion of the currency so as to allow for currency being issued against paper during seasonal demand. Do you not put it here at the discretion and will of the issuer? Yes, but there is this convertibility which regulates the discretion. Convertibility is a means by which the will of the issuer is regulated. There will be no danger. Although I admit that even under the gold standard, the gold may absolutely pass out and the country may only be inundated with paper notes. Would you say that the obligation to convert into an international currency at two given gold points is sufficient to ensure the stability of money? Because if you overissue internally, your money will depreciate in relation to gold? Yes, I admit it, but it will be long after. There will be a long interval before that thing may happen, and in the case of some countries, it may not happen. How was the gold standard work before the war in Europe and in other countries? It worked on the basis of convertibility, not only convertibility for external purposes. But was that standard not in the main worked by the central banks not converting into gold but holding foreign exchange, and only in the last resort was gold flowing from one center to another? But their arrangements as to convertibility were perfect and absolute. You also know that a great many of the countries on the continent of Europe who had perfectly stable currencies had practically no gold in circulation? Yes, that was so. Chairman, we are much obliged to you, Doctor, for your very full assistance today. The witness withdrew. The end.